Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Happy Monday, my preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Hey, everybody. I've had conversations recently that kind of inspired this episode. I was telling Alison about them and I said, I just really want to talk about this. I'm not even sure where we're going to necessarily take it. So, stay tuned. Also, welcome to Alison's dog's first day of doggy daycare.
Yes!
Since March of 2020. That too.
Yeah. Which I totally kind of understand what it's like now to drop your little baby off at the child care center. I was like, okay, be a good boy, you're fine. And I was like walking away. I was like, oh no, I hope he's okay. I have all this anxiety of like, oh my God, what if he's not being good over there? But so far, they sent me a picture and he's a happy little thing. So
that's so funny that they send you pictures like we send to the kids. Okay, anyway, back to the topic at hand. I have frequent conversations with teachers and parents about children. It's part of the work that I do. And I've noticed this pattern where when someone tells me about a child and then they're going to bring up that child again in the future, they do that based on the struggle. And here's an example. A teacher the other day said to me, Cindy, do you remember when I was telling you about the boy who hits everybody? And I'm thinking, is this how we're going to frame this child in everybody's heads? Another person recently said to me, Cindy, do you remember last month when we were talking and I told you about the girl who won't sit when she's eating? And I'm thinking, not everybody sits when they're eating. Not everybody's capable of that. And why is that her primary identifier? So I started to pay more attention to my conversations with people over several days, and it just kept happening and happening. Honestly, I don't even know if many people are aware of it, but I took that and I said to Alison, I really want to talk in this podcast about how we frame children, not just how other people might remember them or think about them, but also how we frame them in our own heads. Because wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if everyone described us by our strengths? Right. Here's an adult example. Like, I would love for people when they're referring to me to say something like, Cindy, she's the one who knows so much about child development. Remember seeing her? Instead of Cindy, she's so short. Remember? Like, it's so much of how we describe children and adults are things that they cannot control, which is why I point out my shortness, which you probably can't see on YouTube, but I'm short. So I think we need to think about the language that we use. I would like somebody to say to me, instead of, do you remember that kid I told you who was hitting everybody? How about, do you remember that kid that I mentioned him last week? He's really great at using blocks to build complicated structures. I'm still challenged by his hitting. Because the truth is, that's the accurate statement. You're challenged by his hitting, but he's full of talents.
Right, because children are not, it's not their behavior. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, they shouldn't be defined by the behavior. That behavior is going to come and pass, most likely, as they develop and grow. So why would we label him based on this one phase that he's going through of like, he hits everyone or whatever it might be? It should be, that boy who has a talent for drawing, he's struggling with something right now, and it's causing him to hit his friends. How can I help him? Instead of being like, oh, that boy who hits, because now that boy who hits, that label might stay with him for years as he passes up through teachers and grade levels or whatever it may be. He's now the boy who hits instead of the boy who has a lot of talent, who happened to have a hitting face, I stop labeling them like that.
Talents are mentioned as an afterthought.
Yes.
Like, I'll get a lot of information about how the child is struggling or challenging the adults, lots and lots of information about that. And then toward the end of the conversation, people will say to me, but you should see, he's like 4 years old and can totally read a book. Well, let's lead with that.
Let's lead with that. The boy who can read. Yeah.
reading ahead of his age level. He has this amazing gift, and we're struggling with this particular behavior that he's exhibiting. Right. How about leading with that? And how about then the next conversation can be about, remember the child I told you who's reading already? Yeah. And let's flip the script, I think, and let's work really hard to do that. And very often, by the way, the children can hear you.
Yes, they can hear you. And other children are hearing you label this child as the hitter. And then they stigmatize the child, probably over hitting, like, I'm not going to play with him, or I'm going to go tell my mom that this is the boy who hits, or whatever it is. And you don't want that. Like, instead you could be like, here's the child who could read. And then when another child hears that, they're like, ooh, I want to be like that. Maybe he can help me to read. Maybe, and then you're spreading positivity rather than negativity.
Yeah, I think it's important that everyone understands that we see the children's strengths, including their families, other people you talk to. We need to know that you see them, their whole being. And I know as a parent, it can be so hard to acknowledge all the time, be acknowledging the good we see, because we tend to be concentrated on how do I help my child? How do I correct my child? No one gave me a handbook for this child. And as I mentioned on the last episode, I have a child, who was a bit challenging when he was in the early childhood years to be the parent of, as we were tossed out of activities because of behavior. And if you want to know the particulars, listen to the last episode. And in case you're wondering, my son does know that we talked about him. He's listened to it. He was like laughing about it because he's now a fine adult. I don't know that he would have laughed at it 10 years ago, but he's laughing about it now, and he's fine with sharing it. So we're going to talk about him for a second again. He said, okay, he could have been the child who disrupted everybody in story time. And I'm pretty sure that that's how the other parents described him when he got in trouble. Oh, that's the kid who keeps disrupting the other children. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What did we say about my son's talents, Alison? You remember what we pointed out?
Well, his talents now?
Yeah.
Yeah. We said that when he went for his job review, that they said he had exceptional leadership skills.
And that was always the case. That was always the case.
Yes.
So, but I don't expect people to say, oh, he's such a leader, that kid got in trouble. Like, I don't. Right. Acknowledge it, that child with those leadership qualities. It would be nice if we did that. Maybe we can get to be a society that does that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot, it's so easy for teachers and parents and family members to focus on the negative things because they're easy to pinpoint. And like, if a child's having a behavior struggle, you're like, oh, we got to fix that. It's always about fixing something. It's always about how could we avoid that or prevent that? And instead, I feel like we should focus on the other stuff. And then maybe that negative behavior might disappear because this child is like, oh, wait, I can do stuff. I can do this. Look, they're showing me all the good things I can do, and then that other stuff might kind of fade away a little bit or not be as focused on.
Maybe we won't obsess so much about it.
Right.
As you said, I think what you were saying, Alison, is that the more challenging aspects of their personality or their behavior, which are two different things, really, that's the low-hanging fruit. And so we grab onto it. Yeah. And actually, maybe we would get to know children a little deeper if we had to dig for what was great about them. I would have loved if that library person would have dug for what was great about my son before she tossed her, because he is
instead of tossing him out.
He is a fun and funny and engaging person. You know what? If he's looking for attention or to lead, why not call him to the front and have him help you with the book? But that's the difference between people who are trained in early childhood education and behavior management and people who are simply working with early learners but don't have that training, which is, we've talked about the importance of experts in other episodes, and teaching young children is an expertise. It's part of what you learn about working with young children, is that you have to give them what they need and then their talents shine. Yeah. If they need attention, you give them attention, their talents shine. If they need to be in a position of leadership and you give them that, you're going to see what they're great at. And especially now after so many months of nearly a year really of interrupted educational systems.
Mhm.
Children are struggling so much now with social emotional development that's beyond our
Yeah.
control.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right? The ability to interact in ways that we were used to and all, it's kind of beyond our control because of the virus. But recognizing their strengths and leading with that in the conversations that you have about them, not only changes the framework in your head, but it also can help them to see how good they are, even in challenging circumstances.
Yeah, because through distance learning, that's usually the emails I'll get from parents. Be like, hey, I noticed my son can't do this or can't focus on this or can't or won't do this. And I'm like, okay, you have to understand that this is a different type of learning and we're not, like, however, your child can do this. And I noticed this while he was on the meet today, like these kind of things. And then the parents are like, oh, okay. Like I think all they worry about is like, they're not focusing or they're not doing this. And instead of focusing on what you can't do, focus on what you can do, like focus on what they can do.
And share that with teachers so that they can help enhance that. And maybe it'll start to flip the script about your child if your child exhibits a little more challenging behavior. I think that we're able as early childhood professionals, when a parent would come to me and say, oh my gosh, my child is behaving this way, or I'm really concerned about this skill, or what, I would always say to them, that's a little bit of a struggle for your child. And here's where your child excels. Mm-hmm. We also, when we have conferences with families, we intentionally tell you the good about your child so that, we see the whole child. And then when we're describing the children we quickly go to the negative. Very quickly, we're at the negative. So I'm hoping that this episode helps you think about that. Do you quickly, when you are describing children, you're sitting among family and you're talking about other family members' children or your children. You are in an educational staff meeting and you need to discuss a child. Yeah. What is the first thing you say?
Right. Because I feel like we need to frame almost everything positively. Because I feel like even when we're talking to the child about how their day went, I think instead of saying, well, what happened today? You could say, what went well today? Do you know what I mean? And then you get the child then focusing on their own strengths too, which will just build them up, and then, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of
work to be done around positive conversations and positive approaches to behavior. And maybe that first step is this. Maybe that first step is when you are describing children, start with the strengths. There are kids in the neighborhood where I live who can be kind of challenging. They play in the street. They don't necessarily get out of the way of cars as quickly as we would like. They can be loud when we would prefer quiet. I mean, there are things, right? There are always things about what goes on in a neighborhood with some of the kids. They sometimes destroy some things that you don't want destroyed.
Yeah.
Also, these are really friendly kids, by the way.
Right.
And, when I see them, they always say hello and they're always laughing and smiling. Surely there's a way that we can describe them in my neighborhood other than those pain in the rear end kids, which is something that I hear a lot. I'll hear adults say, those kids who are always such a pain. Yeah.
It's like, no, those friendly kids who always say hello to me, happened to damage something yesterday, or whatever.
That group of friendly kids.
Got a little rowdy yesterday. Yeah. Cause they're also just being kids, some of it, them being loud and playing and laughing is just childhood a little bit. But
I feel like it almost feels unnatural to phrase it that way about these
right?
children.
It
feels like so unnatural because we're not used to it, because we weren't talked to or about that way, because we weren't trained to do that. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I mean, we can still discuss the struggles. It's not like I'm trying to sugarcoat the struggles, but I would like to recognize that they are whole people.
They're whole people.
They're whole people, and so they have good and bad. After this episode, folks, sit and reflect on how you've described kids. What's the first thing you say? And I hope that you really consider that. Bring it back. If you work on a teaching staff, though I hope you've shared this podcast with them, and I know that we have some groups of teachers who listen, bring it back and say, you know, I was listening to this podcast and the hosts pointed out that we often go right to the negative when we talk about kids. Are there things we can do or exercises we can do to practice not doing that? It does frame how you think of the child.
Yeah.
And what is in the forefront, you know? Is the talent in the forefront, or is the struggle in the forefront? And I would prefer to think for my own children that people had their talents in the forefront.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like as a teacher, it would make you enjoy your day more to focus on all these positive things. Like instead of saying, hey, I have a really tough class. Yeah, maybe it is a challenging class, but you're going to learn so much from it. So, and you could find good in every single one of those kids, you know? So if you start saying like, oh no, this class, you know, is whatever however you want to positively frame it, then you'll go to work enjoying your day a little bit more, you know, rather than be like, oh, I got to work with those, you know, no. And it's like, you got to reframe your whole being.
So I guess this is a flip the script, go to the positive first. And see how that impacts you. And we would love to find out how that impacts you. Does it kind of soften your impression of who the children are when you have to consciously remember to think about and describe this child first by strength and then by challenge versus the opposite? Let us know. Alison, tell us how they can contact us.
All right. So you can find us on Facebook at How Preschool Teachers Do It podcast. We also have a website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com. Both of those places you can comment on the pages. There's a little comment section on the website, and you can always Facebook message us on the Facebook. You can find us wherever podcasts come to you, and you want to rate us 5 stars wherever you find us, because we're just awesome and we want to be positive. So there you go.
We had somebody, a couple people actually contact us recently saying they listen on a platform that doesn't have a star rating. And I was like, wow, that's a shame. Because they were like, we would completely give you 5 stars. And I was like, So if you are on a platform that has ratings, you know, hey, do that. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, because our subscribers keep increasing and we're hoping to get to the level where we get all kinds of YouTube benefits. You don't have to watch on there all the time, but hit subscribe. Also, you get to see our faces and the progression of us through this.
That's true.
We wish you hope, and we will catch you next time on the podcast.
Bye, peeps.